All right, me. It is late April, and I have forced myself this Sunday to sit down and read the next book by L. Frank Baum, which was The Lost Princess, which I think is the 11th, right? It's the 11th. Yes, it was the 11th book in the Complete and Wonderful Oz books. I've forced myself to read this, but it's partially because there are boxes next to me, and my contract is supposed to be, is being presented to a school board tomorrow, and so hopefully by tomorrow evening I will once again officially be hired to teach. So that's exciting, but what that also means is I will try to get some of these things done and books done and then packed up. So yeah. But that's that. The Lost Princess, I think it was certainly more enjoyable than a lot of the other previous entries into our series, and I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that we actually just engage with the characters that have been created instead of creating new ones and then shoehorning our intrepid heroes into the story at the very end, right? And so there are still some new characters, which is just a question of why, right? Because throughout all of this, what ends up occurring is that the Lost Princess occurs, in which Ozma disappears, as well as every single important magical item in the Land of Oz disappears, and so Dorothy and everyone go hunting for Ozma, as well as all these lost items. We also then get introduced to, on the other side, Cookie something, whose name I did not bother to learn, but Cookie and Frogman, who Cookie has lost a magical baking dish that is actually a transporter and a teleporter, but she doesn't know that because she just bakes in it. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say on that. But then you have Dorothy traveling with all of the other girls. So you have Trot and Betsy and Toto, because I also forgot that at the end of the third book, I think it's revealed that Toto can talk now that he's in Oz, but then Toto never talks because we just never see Toto. And then who else is she traveling with? It's not the Shaggy Man. She's traveling with the Wizard. And then also traveling with all of our wonderful animals, which is Toto. Yes, Cat, I'm aware of you. Toto, the Hank the Mule, the Sawhorse, and the Cowardly Lion. The Cowardly Lion is here. It makes an appearance. How lovely. Love the Cowardly Lion. Love Toto. Love that they're here. Really, I think it is actually, in terms of like all of the stories that have been in The Wonderful Oz so far, maybe the most actual, like, oh, this is an actual storyline of that isn't just repeating Dorothy's first adventure in Oz, right? Because the entire setup is that so many people have lost something, and like the entire thing is that as you're traveling, it is more and more people have lost something, right? And so it mimics the original Oz story, which is that Dorothy gains companions and they're all in search of something that they're missing, right? Which is part of one of the things that, like, the other Oz books don't do, is that they set up the whole storyline, but then they don't. There's no execution on this idea of what you are missing, and you are going on adventure to find what you are missing, right? Versus this, where now it is, okay, now you're doing the same thing, but instead of it being something that you were missing, it is something that has been lost or taken. And so, you know, you are, in theory, if these were more, as a whole, more interesting characters, and it would be about trying to live in a world and live and figure out problems when you have lost a part of yourself, right? Which I think is at least a much more interesting thing, right? This really only gets brought up through Toto, actually. There's a couple different chapters which have this kind of downtime right before they go to bed, in which Toto and all our animal characters are kind of talking with one another, and Toto has lost his growl. And so there is quite a bit of Toto-centric things that are about Toto losing a part of themselves and not being comfortable with who they are now because they have lost something that really defined them, which I think is a very, very interesting communication to have, right? Yeah. In terms of other interesting things that are in this book, you have Cookie and Frogman. They go to, what is it them or is it the other group? One of the groups, because it's Cookie and Frogman. They eventually meet the bears, so it has to be Cookie and Frogman, I think. Cookie and Frogman go to Thigh, I think it is. It's THI, where everyone looks like playing cards, was my kind of vague feeling of the descriptors. But they meet the High Licorum Consulate, or whatever the guy's name is, in which it is this very interesting take on government of, I am their king, but I can't let them know that I'm their king, because they want to feel like they rule themselves. And so I have set up a system in which they come to me with legal advice, and then I get to decide laws in their entirety, right? Which is a very, very interesting take on government as a whole, but also concepts of democratic societies, of libertarian societies. A very, very interesting take on that. And then I think the interesting thing to talk about is Yugu the Shoemaker. Yugu, UGU, who is this book's evil character, in which Yugu was the one that did take all these magic items. But as gets very poignantly described, is that it is not because Yugo is doing things out of pure malice, right? It is because Yugo has been told that he has to be the best, and he in some way has, the story is that he's come from a long line of magicians, and he couldn't quite master it and has become a shoemaker instead. And so he now has this opportunity to complete this line of magicians that he was supposed to live up to, not out of pure malice, but through kind of happenstance of learning something and then going after it, right? And so it's not about him being just evil. It's about him having this massive ambition and being told that he has to be the best, and just following through on that, right? Which I think is a very, very interesting take on things, right? Because that's something that I think, right, even though this is L. Frank Baum, and this is L. Frank Baum going, you should never, ever, ever, or these books shouldn't have morals. They're supposed to just be adventure stories for children, yada, 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 bullshit. The concept or idea of like, you know, even if you think that you are doing things to make yourself better, that can still be very harmful to people, right? Is a very interesting concept to try and teach to children, right? And it's something that I think a lot of people still struggle with, right? Of well, I'm just doing things. I'm doing this because it is the best thing for me. Does not indicate that is the best decision for everyone overall, right? Which is, I think that's sometimes very hard to articulate. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for The Lost Princess. Certainly one of the better Oz books. Still took me a lot longer to read it than it should have because I fell asleep through it multiple times. But yeah, that is The Lost Princess.